Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you today that you are closer to your breakthrough than you think. You may be looking at your situation and wondering, how is this going to change? When will things get better? How long do I have to wait? But I came to remind you, God can turn your situation around in an instant. In just 24 hours, everything can change. The impossible can become possible. Doors that seem locked forever can swing wide open. The report that looked hopeless can turn into a testimony. That financial struggle can suddenly shift in your favor. The relationship that seemed broken beyond repair can be restored. God is not limited by time, and He is not bound by human reasoning. He can do in a moment what would take years in the natural. Think about Joseph in the Bible. One day he was in prison, forgotten, overlooked, and seemingly stuck. But in just 24 hours, God took him from the prison to the palace. He went to sleep as a prisoner and woke up as a prime minister. That's the kind of turnaround our God can do. It may look like nothing is happening, but behind the scenes, God is arranging things in your favor. He is shifting people, aligning opportunities, and preparing the right doors to open at just the right time. Life has a way of making us feel stuck. We pray, we believe, we do everything we know to do, yet nothing seems to change. The dream remains distant. The door stays closed. The struggle lingers. But just because nothing looks different on the outside doesn't mean God isn't working on the inside. At the right time, in a single moment, everything can shift. One touch of God's favor and years of waiting can be overturned in an instant. He doesn't need months or years to turn your situation around. He can do it in a day, in an hour, in a moment. Think about Joseph. He spent years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, forgotten, overlooked. But God had a plan. One night Joseph went to sleep as a prisoner, and the next morning he woke up and was summoned to stand before Pharaoh. Within hours, he went from wearing shackles to wearing a royal robe. In less than a day, he went from being a slave to becoming the second most powerful man in Egypt. That's how quickly God can turn things around. You may feel like you're stuck right now, stuck in a job that isn't going anywhere, stuck in a financial struggle that won't seem to break, stuck in a health battle, believing for healing but not seeing progress. But let this be a reminder to you, God has already set the appointed time for your breakthrough. You may not see it yet, but the shift is already in motion. He is lining up the right people, preparing the right opportunities, arranging the right circumstances. And when the moment is right, everything will fall into place. It doesn't take long for God to bring the breakthrough. What looks permanent is only temporary. That problem that seems like it will never end can change overnight. The sickness that looks like it's getting worse can suddenly turn around. The financial burden that's been weighing you down can be lifted in a moment. The right phone call, the right connection, the right opportunity can come knocking when you least expect it. God is not limited by time. He doesn't need years to fix what's broken. He can do it suddenly. But here's the key. You have to stay in faith. You have to keep believing even when there's no sign of change. Too often we let delays convince us that nothing is happening. We allow disappointment to settle in, telling ourselves maybe it's not meant to be. But just because you don't see it yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Just because it's taking time doesn't mean it's not on the way. God has the final say. Not the economy, not the doctor's report, not the circumstances that seem impossible. He is a God of suddenlies. When you stay in faith, when you keep believing, when you wake up every morning expecting His favor, you put yourself in position to receive the turnaround that's already on its way. You are closer than you think. The breakthrough, the promotion, the healing, the right person, It's already been scheduled. Any moment now, things can shift. What took years to build, God can restore in a moment. What seems impossible, He can make possible in an instant. Get ready, stay in faith, because your time is coming. There are times in life when we feel like nothing is happening. We've prayed, we've believed, we've stood in faith, but the situation hasn't changed. The dream hasn't come to pass. The healing hasn't arrived. The right door hasn't opened. And in those moments, it's easy to get discouraged and start thinking that maybe it's not meant to be. But just because you don't see anything happening doesn't mean God isn't working. Just because the situation looks the same today as it did yesterday doesn't mean the breakthrough isn't coming. Behind the scenes, things are shifting in your favor. The right people, the right opportunities, the right moments, they are already being arranged. Think about Joseph. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison. For years it seemed like his dream was never going to happen, but in a single day, everything changed. He went to bed in a prison cell and woke up in a palace. In less than 24 hours, he went from being forgotten to being second in command over all of Egypt. He didn't see it coming, but God had already set things in motion. While Joseph was waiting, God was working. While he was wondering, God was preparing. And at the appointed time, the doors opened and everything shifted in his favor. That's how quickly things can change. One moment you're struggling and the next you're walking in abundance. One moment the medical report looks bad and the next the doctors are amazed at your recovery. One moment you feel stuck and the next the right phone call, the right connection, the right opportunity is in front of you. When the time is right, everything will fall into place. What you thought was going to take years, God can do in an instant. What seemed impossible, He can make possible overnight. But here's the key. You have to stay in faith. Too often, we allow the waiting period to steal our joy. We get discouraged, we give up, we settle. But if you could see what's happening behind the scenes, you would keep believing. If you knew what was coming, you wouldn't be discouraged by what's in front of you. You would wake up every morning with excitement, thinking maybe today is the day. Maybe this is the moment my breakthrough arrives. A delay is not a denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. When you stay in faith, when you keep believing, you're putting yourself in position to receive the suddenly that God has already planned. The right people, the right opportunities, the right moments are already lined up. When the time is right, nothing can stop it. What you're facing today is not permanent. The struggle is not permanent. The sickness is not permanent. The waiting is not permanent. The God who turned Joseph's situation around in 24 hours is the same God who can turn your situation around. He's not limited by time. He's not restricted by circumstances. He doesn't need years to fix what's broken. He can do it in an instant. Stay in faith, keep believing, and get ready. The shift is coming, and it's going to happen faster than you ever imagined. There are moments in life when we feel stuck, like nothing is moving forward. We pray, we believe, we do everything we know to do, yet the situation remains the same. The doors won't open. The opportunity doesn't come. The healing hasn't manifested. It's easy to get discouraged, to wonder if things will ever change. But just because you don't see movement doesn't mean things aren't shifting in your favor. Just because nothing looks different on the surface doesn't mean God isn't working behind the scenes. In an instant, everything can turn around. The struggle that has lasted for years can suddenly lift. The financial burden that's been weighing you down can be removed overnight. That opportunity you've been waiting for, the promotion you've been praying for, the relationship you've been believing for, it can all shift in a moment. When the time is right, nothing can stop what's meant for you. No person, no delay, no obstacle can stand in the way of the breakthrough that has already been scheduled for your life. Think about Joseph. For years, it seemed like his dream was never going to happen. He was betrayed, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. He could have thought, this is how my life is always going to be. But what he didn't realize was that in the waiting, God was preparing him. Every struggle, every setback, every challenge was getting him ready for what was coming. Then, one day, everything changed. He went to bed in a prison cell and woke up in a palace. In just 24 hours, he went from being forgotten to being second in command of an entire nation. That's how quickly God can turn things around. You may be in a season where you feel like you've been overlooked. You've been faithful. You've done the right thing, yet nothing seems to be happening. But what you don't see is that while you're waiting, God is working. While you're trusting, He is preparing. When the time is right, you won't have to force things to happen. You won't have to beg for the promotion, struggle for the opportunity, or try to make things work in your own strength. The right door will open, the right people will come, and what was once impossible will suddenly become possible. But here's the key. You have to stay in faith. Don't let the waiting season discourage you. Don't let the delays talk you out of believing. Too often, we see nothing happening and assume nothing ever will. But faith is believing even when there's no evidence. Faith is standing firm, knowing that what God promised is on its way. The dream, the breakthrough, the restoration, it's already in motion. The right connections, the right opportunities, the right moments are already lined up. When the moment comes, everything will fall into place, and you'll realize that it wasn't a delay, it was divine preparation. God doesn't do things halfway. When He brings the breakthrough, it will be bigger than you imagined. When He restores, it will be greater than what was lost. When He promotes, it will take you further than you ever dreamed. That's why you can't give up now. You're closer than you think. What has seemed impossible for years is about to shift in your favor. Keep believing, keep trusting, and get ready. The change you've been waiting for can happen in an instant. There are seasons in life when it feels like nothing is happening. We pray, we hope, and we do everything right, but we don't see the breakthrough we've been believing for. It's in these times that we often feel stuck, frustrated, and wonder if things will ever change. But I want to remind you today, just because you don't see progress doesn't mean God isn't working. Just because nothing looks different on the surface doesn't mean the situation isn't shifting in the unseen realm. God is always at work behind the scenes, orchestrating things in your favor. And when the time is right, things will change in ways you never imagined. Think about the story of the Israelites. For years, they were enslaved in Egypt, oppressed and trapped. It seemed like their situation was hopeless, like they would never be free. But God had a plan, and in one moment, He moved mightily. He parted the Red Sea, and they walked through on dry ground. It didn't take years or months for their deliverance. It happened in a single moment. What seemed impossible in the natural became a reality by the power of God. Your breakthrough may not come in the way you expect, but know this: when the time is right, it will come, and nothing can stop it. It's easy to get discouraged in the waiting. We look at the situation and think, this is never going to change. Maybe it's just not meant for me. But that's the enemy trying to get you to quit before the miracle happens. Don't let the waiting season fool you. Just because things are delayed doesn't mean they are denied. Behind the scenes, God is working out all the details, connecting the dots, arranging circumstances, and putting everything in place. Your waiting is not wasted. Every moment of it is preparing you for what's coming. And when the breakthrough comes, it will be worth the wait. Take a moment to think about the story of David. Before he became king, he was a young shepherd in a field, overlooked by his family and others. He had no idea that God had already chosen him to be king. For years, he faced rejection, battles, and difficult circumstances. But God was using each experience to prepare him for his destiny. Then one day, when the time was right, he was anointed as king, and everything changed. He went from being an unknown shepherd to becoming one of the greatest kings in history. Your story may look ordinary now, but God is preparing you for something extraordinary. The key is this: don't lose faith in the waiting. The breakthrough may be just around the corner. The job you've been waiting for, the healing you've been praying for, the breakthrough in your finances, God is not finished yet. Just because you don't see it happening doesn't mean it's not coming. When the time is right, God will open the right doors and make things happen suddenly. Keep believing, keep standing in faith. Your time is coming. Your breakthrough is already in motion. When you stay in faith, you position yourself to receive the blessing that God has planned for you. Sometimes it's easy to give up and think it's never going to happen, but don't let your circumstances convince you that the miracle is impossible. God specializes in the impossible. What seems like a setback is often a setup for a greater blessing. What seems like a delay is actually divine preparation. When God opens the door, it will be bigger and better than you ever expected. The waiting period is not a punishment, it's preparation. God is making sure everything is lined up for your success. He is making sure you are ready to handle the blessing. You may feel like you're in a holding pattern right now, but what you don't see is that God is doing something new in you during this time. He is strengthening your character, deepening your faith, and giving you the resilience you need for the next season. When the breakthrough comes, you will be ready. God is never in a hurry, but He is always on time. His timing is perfect. He sees the big picture when we only see a small part of the story. Trust Him through the waiting. Keep believing, keep expecting, and get ready, because when the time comes, everything will change. The breakthrough, the blessing, the restoration, it's coming. It may take longer than you expect, but when it arrives, it will be worth the wait. You are closer than you think, and God is about to turn things around in ways you can't even imagine. Keep standing, keep believing, and get ready for the impossible.